Hello everyone, I'm Tally, this is Farrell, and we are Bored of It, and welcome to Bored of It's Board Game Highlights, Episode 2.
Yes, so we have another collection of games for you, some old, some brand new, some in the middle, and we're going to be talking about what we thought. We're going to have our reviews of Harmonies and Hutan. I think we'll do those first. We've also gone back to some old classics and favourites like Viticulture and Scythe. And we also have some other ones like Molly House, which we've been playing and aren't decided on yet, surprisingly for us. And then we also have the new expansion to Zoo Tycoon, New Shores. So let's jump in first with Hutan. As a disclaimer, before we begin, Hutan was provided to us by the publisher for review. And this is I was going to say tile drafting game, but it's a card drafting game, but the cards
are a means to get tiles, I suppose, yeah.
So this is by the designers of, I believe, Heat and also Aqua. And if you watched that review on our channel or our end of year roundup, it was probably Aqua was my least favorite game I played last year. So it was interesting to see which way this would go because it's very similar in terms of the building out a tableau and drafting. But I'm delighted to say that we really enjoyed Hutan. So it's one of many of a popular theme at the moment, basically kind of introducing biodiversity into a space here, rainforest in Indonesia. So you're trying to introduce plant life and then attract animals, basically. So each turn, you're kind of drafting one card from the middle, and these cards are going to have certain colors of flowers on them, and you're going to place them in your tableau on your player boards, with the kind of caveat that you have to put them orthogonally adjacent when you're placing them. And the first flower you kind of put has to be adjacent to flowers you already have, and then kind of after that, they have to be adjacent to the ones you just put down. So it's a little bit tricky because you want certain colors in certain sectors. So you don't want to have green and purple in one sector because then you score negative points. So it's quite a fast playing, tense type drafting game. And also what you're kind of trying to do is get two flowers on a space because then they turn into a tree. And then if you completely fill out an area with trees, the last tree turns into an animal, which is worth even more points. And once you play the advanced version, which is just adding some objectives in, then you have different things to score for, as well as kind of the more basic things like trees and animals and filling spaces.
Yeah, no, I really, really enjoyed this game. It's one of those games where it's pretty simple, very easy to get to grips with, but I think you can make a lot of different decisions here, and that's where it becomes interesting. So even with the card drafting, to get the right colours of flowers, like you said, you want to place them in the right way, but also at the right times in order to score maximise. So it's kind of the tense kind of like race to get the perfect flower combination, let's say. But then once we introduced the more advanced objectives, I thought that got very interesting because you can really start to strategize then. For example, one area has you need more flowers to fill it out, let's say, which will score you more points. But some of the objectives were fill up areas with yellow flowers, let's say. And then from one game, was like, okay, I'm going to try and go for yellow flowers as much as possible and then just fill up as many small spaces of 2 squares as I possibly can in order to because there was no minimum requirement for squares. So even though I wasn't getting the points from filling out the big areas, I was getting more points from the objectives. So I think there's some nice decisions to be made here. And it is quite tricky, the puzzle of where to put the right coloured flowers. And you just have to sometimes take the L. And put different mixed coloured flowers in an area where you didn't necessarily want to because you need to get that red right there or whatever it might be and how the flowers come out. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed this actually. Nice, snappy, quick nature game, and who doesn't love that?
Yeah, I think you touched upon it, and what I really like about this is, especially when you have in the objectives, there's actually a lot of different directions to go in, despite it being quite a simple core of drafting a card and putting those flowers in. Because you have the scoring objectives, which might say, fill up small spaces, but then you also have the terrain itself and filling up spaces completely. That will give you points. But then if you're kind of going to fill up as much as you can, it's harder to put 2 flowers on one space. So then you're not getting trees or animals and you're losing. So there's like a lot of different ways to attack it and a lot of different balances you're trying to manage. And I find that really interesting.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is you're always going to get negative points pretty much.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because I think it would be pretty impossible to fill up the entire player board. So you just have to really think about how you can minimize that loss, because every empty space basically scores you negative points, but would be incredibly difficult to fill it out. So again, like you said, it's balancing, score maximizing what you can, knowing that you're going to get negative points, but how can you reduce that? I think there was something interesting that happened to me in one of our games where we had an objective where you scored for consecutive trees.
Yeah.
So then you had to think about doubling up your flowers to make a consecutive line of trees.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize at some point I filled out an area and then I got an animal, which is a good thing because that scores a lot of points, but then I broke my consecutive chain. So there's just some little things to think about, and it's a good puzzly little game.
Yeah, I think it's also there's just a lot of interesting, difficult decisions, such as ideally you would think that you want cards that give you 3 flowers because you either get 1, 2 or 3. Because then you're getting more and you're covering up more space. But obviously that comes with the restriction that you need to fit those 3 colors in, and you need them to go in somewhere that is A, useful, and B, not going to tank your situation, basically. So then actually it becomes quite tricky because I want to cover more space, but then these colors aren't quite right for me. Should I take it? Should I not?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of interesting elements like that. So I think if you're into your kind of tile drafters, then this is a full recommend from us. I really, really enjoyed it. It's reminiscent in many ways of things like Cascadia, although it feels completely different in terms of what you're doing. And also I just like how rapid this is, because it says 30 to 45 minutes on the back, and it's for 1 to 4 players. But at 2 players, our games, honestly, I feel like they're about 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
They're really rapid because you are just taking these 2 flowers, bam, bam, done. And you only, I think, pick 18 cards across the entire game.
Yeah, 9 rounds, right? So
yeah. And often, obviously, when you get to the last one, it's not a choice anymore. So it's even quicker. And the last one usually just gives you 1 flower of your choice, so then you get to put it wherever you want, so it's even easier to make that decision. So it just plays in a really good time as well.
You can get a couple of games in.
I can definitely see us going back to it. But so really, really enjoyed Hutan, and fully recommend it if you like the theme or you like tile drafting, or just want something kind of family weight with a bit of bite to it. But let's move on to our next review, which is Harmonies. Next up, we're reviewing Harmonies for 1 to 4 players. And this is another drafting game, and we're also provided this by the publisher for review. And Harmonies is something we were quite late on. I think a lot of you probably already know of it or have played it.
I've not heard of it before.
Or love it already. So we actually got offered to review this, I think about a year ago when it first came out, and I just looked at it and kind of went, nah. And then all I've heard about is how good it is for the last year and win awards and stuff. So I got the opportunity again and took it this time, and I can say it is a banger.
That's a shocker for you because I really like it, don't get me wrong, but I think you're particularly enamoured with it. So
yeah, I suppose. So this is another drafting game where you're kind of drafting sets of 3 wooden tokens, and the tokens are representing different types of land, so rock, grass, wood, kind of river, things like that. And you're kind of building a 3-dimensional, basically kind of
landscape,
in front of you on your player board. For example, you can kind of like stone represents mountains, and you can stack them to 2 or 3 on top of each other, and then it scores you more points. But you're pulled in a lot of different directions because just building things like building a tree here and a mountain there. That gives you some points. But you can also draft animal cards. And these have very specific kind of orientations of landscapes they want. So a level 1 rock next to a 2-level rock next to a tree. And then you kind of will like take a token off the animal card, put it on there. And then essentially what you're trying to do is do this multiple times, because the more you do that, the more these animals score kind of exponentially in one way. And then you kind of complete the card and you can get some more animals in there. So you're kind of pulled in these different directions while also managing the draft that's in front of you, because you have to take all 3. And obviously there might be one of those components you're not very interested in, or you might be taking that pile just for one specific one you need, and then you've got to think about what you have to do. But it's a kind of very simple, very light game that has a lot of thought like into it.
Yeah.
Because I find this takes a lot of thinking time on your turn sometimes to really decide what you want to take and where it's going to go. So what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I've definitely been really enjoying this one. I agree it's very thinky. And I think it's because you really have to consider, like you say, sometimes you have to take tiles that you don't necessarily want, and then it's about trying to maximize those in the best way. And then you might look and say, okay, I didn't really want to take this rock because I was going after a configuration of 3 trees or whatever, but then there's some other cards out that maybe could go for rocks, that maybe go next to trees, and you're always trying to think about how can you best utilize what you've built to score kind of for similar things in the future. But then you have to really consider, when you score, basically you put a cube from the animal card on one of the tiles, let's say, on the configuration, but it has to be on a specific one. So you have to be very careful not to take cards that do utilize the same kind of tiles, because you can only put one cube on one place, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really like that element of it, is really considering, okay, I put 3 fields here. That other card, scoring card, also needs like 1 field. So now I can build, mountains off the field to score for that. And yeah, it's very thinky, like you say. So been really enjoying it. I think in our games, sometimes it has been a little bit frustrating when the right tiles don't come out. But I guess that's where the kind of thinkiness does come from it. But there are 5 piles of 3 to choose from. So it's not like you don't have so much choice. But it just can get a little bit frustrating sometimes when you really, really need just like one green tree and it just doesn't come out at all.
But I agree completely. I think I didn't experience it as bad as you until maybe our last game. But like you say, I think one issue I find in games like this is when they don't have a way to rejig the marketplace. Yeah. And I mean, to be fair here, you do have a choice of 5 different piles, which is like quite a lot. But sometimes it is just like you say that you can go into something and set yourself up for one kind of way. Yeah. And then you just don't ever get those tiles, or your opponents take them. And then you kind of flounder a bit and it gets a bit frustrating. And I think it would really have helped if there was, like in Cascadia, a mechanism to wipe or select different things or something like that. I agree. To make it flow a little bit better, because I think you will experience moments of frustration when drafting here. Maybe not all the time, but they're there. Yeah, I mean, you can take 4 animal cards at any time, right, that are kind of like open that you're trying to work towards. And then as soon as you complete it, and
you put it
punishment
to the
either
side. Yeah,
for not
I think that
completing.
is... I found that quite interesting in the beginning. Maybe we're used to playing more harsh games, but I was thinking, okay, I didn't really complete this one, because some of them have like 2 cubes that you can take off if you do the configuration twice. Some have 3, maybe 4 more sometimes. So, but you don't have to complete it. You just score for whatever, like however far you got. And I found that quite nice, actually, compared to some of the games that we do. But then you've only got 4 spaces, so you can't just keep taking. So there's always that decision as well. I found it was quite interesting. Okay, in the beginning, I got something with fields. I'll try and take an animal card that has fields so that I can work towards something. But then you shouldn't really take too many animal cards in the beginning, because then you're like locking yourself in a little bit. So it's always that balance between, I think I can make something out of this, and I think that will hopefully align with that card, but those tiles might not come out. So tricky balance there.
Yeah, I think also it's quite a nice game in the fact that you're creating a three-dimensional landscape, which is fairly novel. And you always kind of end up with something quite different to what's come before after every game, just due to the randomness of the animal cards you take and what you pick and what comes out. And I think that's a lot of fun, actually. It's kind of very cathartic to end with this wonderful like tableau that you've built out in 3 dimensions.
I always look over at yours and you're building like skyscrapers and like huge tall trees. You always go really in for the going very high.
I didn't think I did, but
but I think it's quite nice as well. Obviously you have the scoring cards, but you do also score generally even if you took no scoring cards for animal cards. Yeah,
exactly.
So that's also where the balance comes in. Okay, I didn't quite manage to make anything from the animal card, but maybe I could just put a tree here because I'll score for that anyway. So yeah, about maximising.
Yeah, I think there's a good balance of you could go all out for just scoring things for the sake of scoring them, or you could try and kind of get animals involved. Yeah. And I think it would probably be fairly even either way if you lent into one or the other, but usually you're going for a combination of both, particularly because the configurations the animals require also score to some extent on their own. But yeah,
I really love the artwork as well. Sorry, just to say, like the whole aesthetic is super, super nice, I think.
It's very soothing.
Yeah, exactly. It's, don't know how to say, sometimes it can fall a bit too cartoonish and be a bit naive maybe in the art style, but this for me is just like, a personal preference, but I really like the way that it looks.
I think actually the worst part about it is the cover, ironically.
Oh, I quite like it.
I just think the cover is actually probably what made me not want to take it the most. I think that does look like cartoonish and...
Oh, I quite like it.
No, I think I much prefer the art in the game than the cover.
Fair enough.
But yeah. No, Harmonies is definitely a recommendation from us. I think, again, like we said, the only negative point we would have is the fact that you can get a bit frustrated sometimes with the drafting, as there's no way to get around that. But it is a great game, great family weight game, great drafting game. So again, check it out if you're interested, or let us know if you already like it, since we're behind the curve on this one.
Okay, next up we have Viticulture, which is a classic in this household, I feel. We used to host Viticulture Fridays. Yeah, exactly, where we'd get our friends around on Fridays and have some wine and eat some tapas, and it was honestly, what a time to be alive. This is, an older Stonemaier game that we recently got out again after a number of years not playing it.
Yeah.
It is, I'm sure everyone kind of knows what it is, but it's a worker placement game about making wine in Tuscany. So you just need to harvest your grapes, plant your vines. You have different tools that you can work with, such as a yoke that you can build an irrigation, and you have to really think about setting up your vineyard in the right way, using your workers throughout different seasons and doing different tasks related to that season in order to harvest grapes, age the grapes and make some delicious wine and then sell it, basically. Yeah. That's the gist of it.
Exactly. So I think we've actually had quite a nice little time lately playing some older games.
Yeah, really enjoyed
I think part of that is you've probably everyone who's watching this saw our video about closing down the channel. And as we said, we still have some reviews to get out. So we're not going to end immediately, but we're doing those and seeing how it goes. And because we haven't really taken on any new reviews, we've kind of been getting like more and more done, basically.
Yeah.
And so now we're at a point where we seem to have a lot of more free time to play these old classics. Like we've got, Viticulture, Scythe, Cascadia, some others. And to go back to these, which some of these we haven't played in like a year and a half, 2 years, despite them being some of our all-time favorites. It's been really, really nice. Kind of like rediscovering the older games and getting back to them. So we've had a really good time. And I just really enjoyed, we played it twice, I think, in the last week or so. And I've really enjoyed getting back to Viticulture. Yeah. What I find quite interesting now, I think we've played a lot of like very smooth and like every aspect is like worked on heavy euros. And Viticulture somehow seems like, I know it's lighter, but it seems somehow like more gamey, if that makes sense. It's more like swingy and wild and not in a bad way. Because obviously you have the visitor cards and they're always a big part of it. But there's just something about it that's a bit more like dynamic, I guess, and off the cuff that I've kind of really enjoyed in comparison to these almost over-polished like heavy euros we've been playing. If that makes sense.
Yeah. There's a bit of Jeopardy or like roller coaster in there, maybe. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I agree. Where anyone could kind of win.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. No, I really enjoyed getting this back out and just generally, like you said, getting some older games back out. The worst part for me about doing the channel and playing a lot of games is like learning the new ones. That's your job to kind of teach me. But yeah, it was really nice to go back to something that we just maybe had to like recheck a few different rules.
I don't even think we opened the rule book, to be honest.
No, maybe
honestly.
not. Yeah. So despite not playing it for a while, very easy to pick back up, low cognitive load in terms of having to learn something new. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. No, it's also, I mean, we absolutely love the theme as well. So I think theme-wise is one of our favorite games. And I just think it can be, if you have relatively level players, it can be very tense. I think both of our games ended quite tense. I won the first one and you won the second one. Kind of we're both like very close. And it was quite funny because we introduced it to, well, not even introduced it, I think, but a friend who'd only played maybe once before.
Yeah, and a long time ago as well.
And he got completely steamrolled.
Yeah.
It was funny because he went out ahead early on and then I don't think he ever filled an order.
No.
And then it was just me and Tally fighting out who got to 20 points first.
We had the advantage though of having that first game.
I think it would have been the same either way, to be honest.
Yeah, probably.
But yeah, I mean, it's just a great worker placement game. Very brutal in that sense, but with the added fun of the Grande worker, where you can go somewhere that's filled up. That's a lot of fun, and I just think there's a lot of fun with the visitor cards and what comes out and how you can kind of get around the rules to do extra actions with those.
Yeah.
So something really recommend if you haven't tried it out, or you should just go back to playing it.
Yeah, this was actually, I've said it before on the channel a long time ago, but I think this was one of the first games we got where it opened my eyes that you could get some more fun themes in board games that weren't just kind of like space or conflict or, you know, things like this.
Yeah.
Like, wow, there's a game about making wine. That's super cool. So it has a special place in my heart because of that as well.
Scythe, if you know this channel, was once our all-time favorite game.
For a long time.
For a long time. It's now slipped down a little bit. I think in part just because we don't get to play it that much. All the friends we used to play it with moved away. But this is a classic Stonemaier game, very popular. It is about kind of alternate history, Great War, or the time after a Great War in Europe. And it's very Cold War-esque. But at the core, it's an efficiency puzzle where you're trying to take actions in the right order that lets you kind of unlock elements on your player board. And when you kind of unlock all of a certain element, you get stars, and this will move towards the end of the game when someone gets 6 stars. So we generally don't play that much because it's not our favorite game at 2 players.
Yeah.
So we had a game on the modular map, which means you can kind of condense the map down, make it smaller. And I think that definitely, helped.
Yeah.
I think it was really nice to get back to it. And it was definitely tense for sure. We had some combat because there was so little space. But I think you enjoyed the game a lot less than I did.
Yeah, I got absolutely rinsed, even though I was Russia, which was my favourite faction.
Yeah, I let you be your favourite faction,
Yeah, maybe I was just out of practice. Yeah, I agree. It was really fun and great to get it back out again. And I do think the modular map definitely made it pretty tense. So if this is something that you are thinking about but worried about 2 players, could definitely recommend that. Yeah, I still really like this game. Don't know what else more to say, really. Still one of our favourites. I still hold to that it's not the number one anymore, though. Like, we don't get it out for a long time, then we get it back out again, and they're always like, oh, was it as good as we originally thought? I still think it deserves to be up there, but I think it, like, not deserves to, but yeah, it's in the right place. It's not like we've got it back out again this one. I was like, no, you know what? That should be our number one game.
Well, not at 2 players anyway. I think if we managed to get it back with a group repeatedly, I could see it going up for me.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. To play it again. Yeah. Maybe it like isn't as interesting anymore though, I have to say.
Yeah. I think you're just saying that because you got whomped. What was it, 117 to 62?
Something like that. Yeah. Maybe that is, again though, because of the 2 players, like yes, the modular map did its job at forcing us together a little bit more, but then it is still just like me versus you in a way. So I think you could just very easily see where it was going because you were higher than me on the popularity track. And yeah, I think it's just, we like the tenseness at the end of the game where you kind of count up the end of the points. And like I knew I probably didn't have that many, so then I knew that you'd won, and there was less jeopardy than when you have 3 players still. And with that being one of our like kind of favorite things about it, even though the map made it more tense in game, actually the end of the game still was a little bit like meh compared to when you play with more people, I think.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed playing Getting Back Out. I really enjoy the efficiency puzzle. I love everything about it. I love the components. I like the physicality of it, moving them around a map, the little resources you're putting on the map and taking off, the upgrading of your player board. To be fair, I do think that it was fairly tense to a certain point, and then I think the turning point was when I used my ability to steal your combat card, and it was a 5, and then play it against you, and that was kind of the end of it at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because then I just went ahead. But I mean, Scythe is an all-time favorite of the channel, and it was really nice to get it back out. But yeah, I wish we had a group to play with more regularly.
Agree.
And we have a real problem now, I think, that, and we've touched on this before, that we've played it so much, and a lot of the friends we used to play with played it so much, that it's also not something we want to introduce to other people because we're just going to destroy them, basically. Because Scythe is a game, because of the efficiency, you need to get to grips with how you should be doing things and in what order, and just like knowing the flow of it.
Yeah.
And I think just coming into this new and like not really knowing like the way to set yourself up, it means you're going to have a bad time. And it's a bit hard to introduce someone to it and be like, by the way, you're not going to be in competition here. So just try and enjoy yourself.
Maybe they would be with me after the way I played last time.
Yeah, maybe. But now you've started getting it back in your mind again. Yeah?
I agree. Ideally, we'd find people that already knew how to play it, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that would be nice. But I'd love to get the campaign back out.
Yeah, that's true. So I was thinking about it when I was setting it up. Yeah, campaign is great, the expansion. So that is Scythe, and at least for me, it was really good to get it back out.
No, it was good.
Finally, we're going to talk about Tycoon, the board game, and its new expansion, New Shores. So both the base game and the expansion were provided to us by the publisher for review. And this is a heavy Euro implementation of Tycoon, the computer game. That was very popular. Classic. Very popular back in the day. So this is a game very focused on attracting animals to your zoo and basically keeping their welfare levels high. So it's a lot of, there's a lot of different phases, but essentially you're going to kind of draft animals from a big marketplace, and then you're going to have to build them enclosures in your zoo, and you're going to require a certain amount of tiles. They want free space to roam. They want little retreats they can go and sleep and hide in. And all of this costs money. And so you're kind of balancing your money versus your running costs versus your popularity, because having new animals come in means that you get more popularity, at least temporarily, and that gives you more money. But then you also kind of, it becomes more difficult to take new animals if your current animals aren't happy. So there's like a really nice balance of focusing on your current animals to get them fully happy versus getting new ones, which obviously lets you kind of go up and up in popularity and interest. So the New Shores expansion, this is a bit of a strange expansion in some ways because it's very much a more soft expansion, but what it does is you had a market board for the animal place, for the animals, and this kind of completely replaces it. So you have an entirely new set of animals to draft, and you kind of are introducing water species and semi-aquatic species where they need land and water, and new terrain types, and kind of reptiles as well, vivariums. So it's very much the same game with a few tiny little tweaks and about 200 new animal meeples. So if that's what you're interested in, you're in for an absolute treat because they're probably better meeples than the base game.
Yeah, I agree. They're absolutely incredible. There's like otters, manatees.
They're incredibly cute.
And they're amazing. Yeah, I really, really enjoy this game. When we first played the base game, I also really enjoyed playing New Shores yesterday. Yeah, it's not different. It's just basically the same game with some different animals. I do think the little twists though, like the vivarium marketplace, so the way that you kind of get animals for that, it's after the building phase, right? And then there's 4 tiles in a 2-player game, and you can decide if you want to spend money on attracting those animals or getting them into your vivarium, basically. So I do quite like there's an additional step of like competition there in a way, because there's only 4 to choose from every round, and it's a little mini game because you're trying to, you have to put kind of common animals in a row basically on your available vivarium spaces, but they kind of can get you some little bonuses as well. So adds a little bit of tenseness there because you have to kind of match the animals in one row on that player board, but you also want to try and get different bonuses from that. So obviously if you're trying to go after the same thing, there's some competition there, where otherwise I don't feel like there's much competition, let's say, elsewhere in the game. Like me and you like never really fight for the same type of animal, for example. Obviously the supply is usually relatively limited. I guess this is one of the things where I think only ever played this 2-player, and I guess with like 3 or 4, which I don't know if I'd want to do because it is a longer game. But I guess when you're drafting from the animal marketplace, you would have much more difficulty because other people might snipe what you want. Whereas with us, it's like... Yeah, I think though, maybe, but you usually tend to kind of go after the same animals because you get bonus points for getting like 3 animals from a certain national park, right? So they usually require the same type of terrain. And I think once you go into that, you try to get the rest of the animals from that national park, let's say, but then I don't know, maybe it's just how it has been, but I went for like the Polar Region National Park and you went for something else. So I think I guess if everyone kind of goes for the same thing in the beginning, but you wouldn't, because then there's a limited supply. I think you could though in the start, but there's only a limit. Like most of the time you're taking all of the animals, so the first person that would like take all of the like Arctic foxes, let's say, the next person would just go for something else, I think. Yeah. Like we've never tried to go after the same thing. Yeah, I guess it is rare. But I think I'm saying with 4 players though, you would like, there's only a limited amount of what's available. So you might end up getting something you don't want because somebody else has taken something. Yeah, I suppose. But yeah, I quite like the vivarium tiles anyway because it adds that kind of little bit of tenseness, which isn't there otherwise in a 2-player game, I think. Yeah, that's fine. I think the vivarium, I like that you get bonuses from the tiles, but it's kind of like a little extra thing. I think it's exactly, yeah. If it wasn't there, it would also be fine, right? It's a nice little to have, but I think you could also completely like play without it. Obviously, some expansions you get it and you think I would never play without that little module ever again, but this is just there and it's fun. Yeah, I think this is mainly just variety, right? And I think probably the reason a lot of people wanted this as well is because of the 100 different animal meeples, and you're certainly getting more here. But also something that's kind of cool, or very cool, is it makes it modular, so it includes cards, so you can make a kind of modular marketplace, so you can have a mix of whichever animals you want from the main game and the expansion. So that's quite cool. So you can kind of have a lot of variety in what's available. Yeah. I think this is a very interesting one because I know when it came out,
it wasn't particularly. It did quite well on the Kickstarter, but nobody really talked about it when it came out. And I've heard some negative stuff. I think the rulebook in particular got a lot of feedback, or negative feedback, which I found quite interesting, because then I don't know if it's because we played it as a prototype as well, like almost pre-rulebook, that didn't matter to us. But I never found too much issue with understanding the game. And we did and do genuinely enjoy it. And even getting back to it now, right? Like we haven't played it in a year and a half or something. We played one game of the base game, one game of New Shores, and we just really like the puzzle. It's a very heavy, tricky puzzle, because you need to be aware of what you're doing and how it will affect, because if you take a new animal, very likely that animal will kind of start with low welfare rating, which then blocks you from taking more animals, and this like puzzle and all the different elements, trying to build things, like managing the spatiality of your zoo.
Yeah.
I think there's really a lot of interesting elements that we really enjoy.
100%. Yeah, the offspring mechanism is
Offspring
quite
mechanism
funny,
is really good,
because,
like really interesting as well.
The animals usually have to be at a certain welfare level to breed, basically. And if you get them there, you roll dice to see whether they do produce offspring every year or not. And sometimes you want that offspring because a group of animals can be happier with more of them, so that raises their welfare. But they take up space, and you can only have X amount of animals per tile, so it might spill over into another space, which means they have less free space to roam in.
And you're paying more to keep them.
Yeah, so that's quite an interesting one. You're always rolling like, no more ostriches.
Yeah,
Can't
you
take
always
any
get trapped
more.
by the ostriches.
Yeah, so that's fun as well, but there's something very difficult to manage,
it's really
basically.
an interesting problem to manage, because
Yeah.
it is like a balance, because they have welfare rating of how many are in an enclosure. So you generally want to, for the first half of the game, keep getting more. But then after a certain point, it's just more money without any bonus for you.
Yeah.
So you're like, it's technically bad for you to have more than the maximum amount. So then it's quite funny in that you're giving your koalas birth control, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we're going to have a full review of New Shores, so watch out for that. But Zoo Tycoon, still really enjoy it. I think it's a fun, really heavy good Euro, and great theme, great meeples. So that was all the games we're going to cover today. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions about any of the games, please ask us, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.